rain had stopped, but the forest still wept. Droplets clung to the translucent leaves, dripping in soft rhythms that echoed to the hollow clearing where the camp stood. The air was thick with the scent of damp soil and machine oil, an uneasy marriage between nature and the technology that had crash-landed here. Around the smoldering wreck of the expedition pod, 5 figures moved with sluggish precision, each wrapped in the dim orange of emergency lanterns. They were survivors of the Ethern Dawn, a mixed-species survey team stranded on an uncharted world. The ship's supplies had survived the crash, but barely. Their food came in gray, vacuum-sealed cubes labeled Sustenance Block 4C. Each cube contained the exact nutrients required for survival, and none of the joy that made survival worthwhile. They chewed in silence, the sound of swallowing louder than any conversation. Lieutenant Mara Quinn, the human among them, sat a little apart from the group, turning the cube in her hands. It was dense, flavorless, and dry, an insult to every memory she had of home-cooked meals. The others ate mechanically, efficient and uncomplaining, though their bodies showed signs of fatigue. The rations kept them alive, but not whole. Captain Rack crouched beside the dwindling supply crate, his scales reflecting the light in dull copper hues. His movements were sharp, economical, as if emotion itself were a waste of energy. 6 rotations left, he said, voice deep and rasping. After that, starvation. Erin, the feathered navigator, gave a low chirp of protest. There must be something in this forest we can eat. There is, said Talon, the insectoid biologist, his mandibles clicking with frustration. I've cataloged 57 plant analogs. 40 are inedible to your species, 10 are toxic to mine, and the rest are unknown. He turned one multifaceted eye toward Quinn. You, human, have a digestive system like no one else. Perhaps. Rack cut him off with a glare. We do not experiment on unknown matter. We stay to the rations. Mara looked up from her cube, and when those run out... Rack's spines bristled slightly. We ration tighter. Right. She tossed the uneaten block back into its wrapper and rose. That's a plan guaranteed to end well. The alien captain's eyes narrowed. Do you have a better one, human? She didn't answer right away. Her gaze drifted toward the tree lean, where bioluminescent spores pulsed faintly in the dark. The forest seemed alive, breathing, whispering possibilities. Maybe, she said, but you wouldn't like it. The conversation ended there. Rack returned to his calculations. Erin busied himself with signal calibrations, and Talon scuttled toward his specimen jars. The night thickened, pressing close around the camp. When the lanterns dimmed, Mara lay awake, listening to the others' restless movements and the faint hum of alien wildlife. Hunger gnawed at her, not just in her stomach, but in her spirit. She had spent months in survival training, learning to live off strange worlds. Yet here, among beings of intellect and power, she was forbidden from using the very instincts that made her human. She rose quietly, boots silent on the metal flooring. Outside, the forest stretched vast and shimmering, its canopy dotted with floating motes that drifted like fireflies. She felt a thrill, part fear, part freedom, as she stepped beyond the perimeter sensors. The deeper she went, the more the alien night came alive. Vines coiled around tree trunks like veins of light, their surfaces warm to the touch. A nearby pool glowed from within, casting ripples of turquoise across her face. She knelt beside it, dipping a scanner into the liquid. The screen flickered with data, high mineral content, faint biotic energy, non-toxic to human biology. She filled a flask. Hours passed in quiet exploration. She found stalks that bled amber sap, tubers with faint peppery scent, and bulbous fungi that exhaled steam when handled. Her tools were simple, a blade, a scanner, and intuition. But where the alien saw danger, she saw a kitchen waiting to be rediscovered. Every discovery made her pulse quicken. The thrill wasn't just survival, it was creation. She wasn't foraging out of desperation. She was reclaiming something sacred. By the time the first light filtered through the forest canopy, her arms were full of gathered ingredients. She could already imagine what they'd become, a meal that reminded them they were still alive, not just existing. When she returned, the camp was stirring. Erin stood at the edge of the clearing. Feathers puffed with alarm. "You went beyond the perimeter," he squawked. Rack turned sharply, his expression darkening. "You disobeyed a direct order." Mara set her bundle down gently on a crate. "I went to find food." "We have food." Rack's tone carried the weight of command, but also a hint of weariness. She looked him in the eyes. "No, Captain. We have fuel. There's a difference." The silence that followed was tense. Talon leaned forward, curious, and Tenny twitching toward the collection. "These specimens, you tested them?" "As best I could. Scanner says they're safe for humans. Non-toxic to most others." Rack's claws tapped against the crate. "Risky. Unnecessary." "Necessary," Mara corrected softly. "Because your crew's morale is crumbling. You think they'll survive 6 more rotations on those cubes? They'll stop caring before they stop breathing." The reptilian captain studied her for a long time. His instincts, honed by command in countless crises, told him to deny her again. But something in her voice, calm, certain, human, made him hesitate. "Do what you must," he said finally, his tone flat. "But if anyone dies from your experiment, you will answer for it." "I can live with that," she said. When Rack turned away, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The others watched in uneasy fascination as she unpacked her findings, arranging them like a ritual. Fungi, roots, leaves, the amber sap now thickened to syrup in the dawn light. The air carried a faint sweetness, a promise of something different. As the sun rose over the wreckage, its rays broke through the mist and struck the human's makeshift table of scavenged metal plates. Her hands moved with practiced precision, not as a soldier, but as someone remembering an old comfort. The others went about their duties, pretending not to watch. But they did watch, their gazes drifting back, again and again, to the human who defied fear and hunger with the same quiet defiance she had shown since the crash. By midday, the camp smelled of something unfamiliar. Smoke, spice, and warmth. It was faint, not yet a meal, but enough to make even Rack pause mid-sentence. For the first time since the Eden dawn had fallen from the sky, the air around them carried something other than despair. It carried hope, strange, fragile, and distinctly human. And though none of them spoke aloud, they all felt the same thing, the beginning of change. A strange scent drifted to the camp the next morning. Thin at first, then curling heavier on the damp air, smoke, heat, and something alive. It wound its way through the sleeping quarters, stirring even those too weary to wake. Rack's nostrils flared first. His predatory senses registered fire and unapproved combustion. He was on his feet in seconds, claws scraping the metal floor as he stalked toward the source. Mara was crouched near the edge of the clearing, surrounded by a circle of smooth stones blackened by flame. She worked in silence, her hair tangled, her skin streaked with soot, her hands steady. On the stones sat a makeshift pan crafted from a hull fragment, inside which pieces of fungi and sliced roots sizzled in bubbling amber sap. The sound was hypnotic, a soft crackle and hiss that drew every alien eye like a beacon. Rack's voice snapped through the air. "You're burning unauthorized fuel." Mara didn't look up. "Cooking." He blinked. "You are contaminating our supplies." "Improving them," she said. She turned a piece of fungus with a shard of metal. "Trust me, Captain, no one's going to die of flavor." The others had gathered now, drawn by curiosity as much as hunger. Aaron tilted his feathery head, pupils contracting as the scent hit him full force. His beak clicked softly. "It smells complex." Talon crept closer, his segmented limbs making faint chittering sounds. "She's altering the molecular composition with heat." He bent near the pan, fascinated. Some of those reactions would create esters, volatile compounds that trigger sensory reward patterns. "In other words," Mara said, smiling faintly, "it makes your brain happy." Rack crossed his arms, his expression caught between anger and uncertainty. "This is a survival situation, Lieutenant. We cannot afford sentiment." "This isn't sentiment." She tapped the edge of the pan. "It's strategy. You said it yourself. We're 6 rotations from running out. You want the crew alert, strong, and compliant? Then feed them something that reminds them they're alive." For a long moment, Rack said nothing. The fire popped, sending a wave of warmth and scent across them all. It was unlike any nutrient block, any sterile ration. The air itself seemed thicker, charged with possibility. Finally, he growled, "You will test it first. If you die, I will jettison the rest." "Fair enough." She tore off a small piece and blew on it, then bit down. Her jaw worked slowly. She swallowed, eyes narrowing as if listening to the taste unfold across her senses. "Sweet, smoky, earthy," she murmured. "Could use salt, though." Talon's antennae quivered. "Salt." She held up a mineral packet from the supply crate. "Sodium chloride. Technically safe for everyone here." She sprinkled the white grains over food, and steam rose like incense. Irin gave a low, involuntary trill, wings half spreading in what his species used to express hunger. Rack's spines flattened. "We will test it. Properly." He ordered Talon to bring the handheld scanner, which blinked through several colors before flashing green. "No toxins detected," Talon confirmed, sounding disappointed he couldn't disprove her. Rack gestured. "Serve a sample." Mara cut the portion into small pieces, laying them on an emergency foil sheet. Irin volunteered first, driven by curiosity more than bravery. He pecked at the food, his tongue flicking out to taste. His eyes widened. "It's warm, textured. It has shape." Talon followed, analyzing even as he ate. His voice trembled slightly. "The chemical complexity exceeds standard sustenance by a factor of 9. There are layers of stimulation, thermal, olfactory, tactile." He hesitated, as if searching for the right word. "Pleasure." One by one, the others tasted. Rack remained still, arms crossed, but the subtle twitch of his throat betrayed interest. When his turn came, he accepted a small piece reluctantly and bit down. His jaw stopped mid-motion. For a moment he didn't move, then slowly swallowed. His eyes narrowed, not in anger but calculation. "It's not unpleasant," he admitted at last. Mara grinned. "High praise coming from you." The camp's mood shifted almost imperceptibly at first. The silence that defined their days gave way to quiet conversation. Irin described memories of his homeworld's harvest winds. Talon began theorizing new combinations of heat and sap viscosity. Even the air seemed lighter, the tension dissolving in laughter that came awkwardly, like a forgotten language being relearned. As they ate, Mara watched them closely. The aliens weren't just feeding, they were remembering. She could see in the way Irin's feathers fluffed, how Talon's antennae curved toward the warmth, how Rack's posture eased fractionally. They were creatures of logic and survival, but now they were responding to something deeper, something instinctive and universal. "This," she said softly, almost to herself, "is why humans cook." Rack looked at her, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "Explain." She gestured to the pan, the flames, the gathered faces. "We don't eat just to live. We make food to remind ourselves why we live. The act of making it, choosing, transforming, sharing, it tells the body there's still something worth protecting." He regarded her for a long moment. "A ritual of morale." "A ritual of meaning," she corrected. Later, when the pan was scraped clean and the fire burned low, the crew lingered. No one wanted to return to their posts. They sat in companionable quiet, the alien stars glittering overhead, each one a reminder of the unreachable home they still hoped to see again. Rack finally spoke. "You risked the mission, disobeyed orders, used resources we could not spare." Mara met his gaze steadily. "And would you undo it now?" The captain's throat rumbled with a low sound, half growl, half sigh. "No." A faint smile crossed her lips. Then maybe it wasn't a mistake. He looked away, toward the embers. Perhaps not. For the first time since the crash, he didn't order lights out or enforce silence. The others remained by the fire until it faded, each of them reluctant to let the warmth vanish completely. Mara leaned back, feeling exhaustion settle into her bones, but beneath it was a quiet satisfaction. She hadn't just fed them, she had changed something. The sterile unity of survival had cracked open, replaced by connection. As she drifted into half-sleep, she heard Irin murmur softly to Talon, his voice filled with wonder. "It is strange," he said, how the human uses destruction, fire, to create comfort. And Talon, ever the scientist, answered thoughtfully, perhaps that is their strength. They conquer through creation. The embers pulsed faintly, mirroring the heartbeat of the camp. The scent of cooked sap lingered long after the fire had gone out, weaving itself into their memories. None of them would admit it aloud, but they all knew something had shifted. By morning, the crash site no longer felt like a tomb. It felt like a home waiting to be rebuilt. And though Rack would later tell himself it was merely the restoration of discipline and order, a part of him knew better. The change had come not from command, but from a single human who had looked at the forest and seen a feast instead of fear. The galaxy called humans predators. Perhaps they were, but not because they killed, because they refused to starve in silence. The days that followed slipped into a rhythm so unfamiliar it felt almost peaceful. The camp that had once echoed with silence now pulsed with quiet purpose. The crew moved more easily, their voices no longer sharp with irritation, but softened by shared labor and faint optimism. The forest no longer seemed a threat looming at the edge of vision. It had become a pantry, a puzzle, a living system waiting to be understood. And at the center of it all was Mara Quinn, no longer the outsider, but the axis around which the group unconsciously revolved. Each morning she led a small party into the trees, mapping edible growths and cataloging their properties. The aliens followed her instructions with cautious curiosity, scanning and recording, while she knelt in the soil, trusting instinct as much as science. Rack never joined these expeditions. He remained at the camp, monitoring systems, maintaining authority. Yet every evening, when the team returned carrying baskets of roots and leaves, he found his gaze drawn to them with an emotion he refused to name. Aaron began to hum as he worked, soft melodies that drifted to the camp like wind. Even Talon, whose world revolved around data and precision, began experimenting, roasting, mixing, boiling, turning meals into controlled experiments of joy. Their laughter startled the forest birds. The atmosphere of despair that had once clung to them like humidity was gone, replaced by something fragile but undeniably alive. But the forest, as if jealous of their newfound comfort, soon reminded them where they were. It began with the sound, low, guttural, and too deliberate to be mere wind. Rack heard it first, deep in the night while he sat reviewing transmissions. A vibration rolled through the soil beneath the camp. Something heavy moved among the trees. The sentry drones flickered, their feeds clouded by static. He stood slowly, every muscle tensing, then moved to the fire pit where the others slept. "Mara," he said softly. She stirred, blinking into wakefulness, instantly alert. "What is it?" Movement. Large. 200 meters out. Within moments, the crew gathered, weapons armed, eyes scanning the darkness. Then they saw it. The shimmer of motion beyond the clearing, a shape too broad to be tree or shadow. When it moved, it did so with purpose. The faint light caught the glint of chitinous armor, 6 limbs shifting through the undergrowth. Its presence radiated quiet menace. Talon's voice was barely audible. Predator class. Possibly territorial. Rack's hand went to his weapon. "We kill it before it decides to test us." "Wait!" Mara's voice was firm, almost gentle. "Don't shoot." Rack turned sharply. "You would risk the camp for sentiment?" "For understanding," she said. She crouched, scanning the air. "Look, see how it circles, keeps distance? It's cautious, not hungry. It's a predator," Rack hissed. "So are we," Mara replied. She took a slow step forward. The others froze. The alien shape shifted, tense. Its movements rippled through the mist, graceful despite its size. Rack's voice was low. "You'll get yourself killed." She didn't answer. Instead, she knelt near the fire pit and tossed a bundle of dried leaves into the embers. A plume of thick blue smoke curled upward, carrying with it a sharp, acrid scent that burned the air. The creature paused, antennae lifting, then released a low hiss and backed away. Another moment, and it was gone, its sound fading into the deeper layers of forest. Mara exhaled slowly. Certain plants release oils that repel large herbivores. Guess it works on carnivores, too. Rack studied her, disbelief flickering across his scale features. You confronted an apex predator with aroma, She smiled faintly. Fire and scent. Works on half the galaxy, apparently. The others stared at the Trilene, as though seeing her differently now. Talon murmured, "You use the same method you use for cooking, altering the environment with heat and chemistry." Mara shrugged. "Different recipe, same principle." Rack said nothing. His instincts told him to scold, to reassert command, but something inside him resisted. She had turned a potential slaughter into survival, without bloodshed. The firelight flickered against his armor as realization crept in like dawn. Humanity's strength wasn't dominance. It was adaptation. They conquered through understanding. The next morning, the camp was quieter, reflective. Even Erin's songs had softened, contemplative rather than bright. Rack found himself watching Mara as she cataloged samples, the precision of her movements laced with a strange calm. She wasn't fearless, he could see that, but she was unwilling to let fear decide for her. That was the difference. At dusk, when the others rested, he approached her. "You defied me twice now," he said. She looked up, wiping her hands on her trousers. "And we're still alive twice over. Seems like a fair trade." His jaw flexed. "You risk too much faith in instinct." "It's not faith," she said. "It's pattern recognition. Everything alive follows one. Once you see it, you can predict it or change it." He studied her in silence. Finally, he said, "You believe humans are superior." Her laugh was quiet, without mockery. "No, just complicated." She tossed another branch into the fire. "You call us predators. But most of what we hunt isn't flesh. It's fear, ignorance, hopelessness. We tear those down and build from what's left." Rack's gaze lingered on the flames. "You have a strange definition of strength." "Maybe," she said, "but it keeps us alive." He turned then, looking over the camp where the others slept easily for the first time in weeks. "Perhaps," he murmured, "it keeps us alive." When the rescue beacon finally pinged 3 rotations later, the signal caught them mid-task. Erin cried out, feathers flaring in excitement. Talon almost dropped his sample tray. The incoming coordinates promised extraction within a day. Relief surged through the camp like oxygen. Mara smiled, but her eyes were distant. "We'll leave tomorrow, then." Rack nodded. "We'll leave, but we won't forget." The final night passed beneath an open sky. The crew gathered one last time around the fire that had become their heart. They ate, laughed softly, shared quiet stories in broken translation. The forest around them seemed to listen. Before turning in, Rack recorded the mission log, his voice rough with something close to reverence. "Stranded on the surface of an uncharted world, our survival was ensured not by technology or command, but by one human's ability to turn nature into ally and hunger into unity. The human taught us that fire does more than destroy. It nourishes, protects, and transforms. Perhaps this is what makes their species dangerous. Perhaps this is what makes them extraordinary." Mara heard him but said nothing. She only smiled faintly at the words, then rose and scattered the last of the dried herbs into flames. The smoke rose in twisting ribbons, fragrant and familiar. When the rescue craft arrived at dawn, the camp was already dismantled. Only the fire pit remained, a dark circle in the soil, faintly warm to the touch. The alien crew boarded silently, each carrying the scent of the forest feast with them like a memory. As the ship lifted through the mist, Rack looked back at the clearing. "You altered this place," he said quietly. Mara met his gaze. "No," she said. "It altered us." The clouds swallowed the world below. In the stillness that followed, Rack understood the paradox he had witnessed. The species called predator that used creation to conquer chaos. And somewhere deep in his chest, where instinct met awe, he knew humanity would never be underestimated again. The fire on that forgotten world smoldered long after they were gone, its smoke a silent testimony to the species that tamed hunger, fear, and even the wilderness itself, not through power, but through the will to make something better.